welcome and thanks for joining us for Alloy's Spokesperson DEI training. I'm Melissa Barata, Senior Vice President, and I oversee client service and strategy at Alloy. And that, of course, includes media training for our clients. And my pronouns are she, her.
Hey everyone, I'm Deej. I'm a senior account director here at Alloy. I work mostly with our cloud-based and SaaS clients across a variety of markets, and I am also part of Alloy's DE&I committee.
So as strategists at Alloy, we both work with global tech brands, helping them grow mind share and market share. And media interaction is often a really big part of that. So when you're tapped to be a company spokesperson, you have a lot of pressure and responsibility, from staying on message to navigating tough questions to speaking in tight sound bites. That can be daunting. But on top of that, when you're being interviewed by the media, it's just as important to be respectful of all your readers and viewers as it is to stick to companies' key messages. So this video is going to equip you with the knowledge that you need to speak inclusively. So let's get started. In the next 15 to 20 minutes or so, you're going to learn the benefits of using inclusive language and why that's really important, what to say and not to say. And we're going to cover that in a few different buckets. First, gender identity. Second, race, demographics, and stereotypes. Third, disabilities and mental health. And fourth, cultural awareness. So Deej, let's start with the why. Why is it so important for spokespeople to use inclusive language when they're speaking with the media?
Yeah, so one of the most important things to remember about using inclusive language is that it's about more than just being politically correct. It's about showing respect for and understanding our individual differences that make up our local and our national and our global communities. So by using inclusive language, you're doing more than just making sure you don't offend someone. You're demonstrating respect for individuals, displaying understanding and humility for other cultures, fostering positive environments, and most importantly, ensuring that everyone feels seen and valued. Now, today we're going to be talking about using inclusive language specifically as it relates to being a representative for your organization, which means there are some additional things we need to think about. While you should look to use inclusive language in every part of your life, when you're representing a company, inclusive language also shows how you carry that company's core values, how it aligns your company's communications with your organization's DE&I initiatives. It will help your words resonate with a wider audience as well.
Awesome. Well, let's start with this first one here, gender identity.
Yes. So using gender inclusive language is one of the easiest and best ways for you to make sure that you're reaching your entire audience. There's still a lot of outdated gender ideologies woven into the language that we use today that can be really alienating for gender nonconforming folks or just exclude entire groups of people entirely. So a quick and effective way to make sure you're being gender inclusive is by asking someone their pronouns or asking them which pronouns they would like to use for this opportunity at the beginning of a conversation that you're about to have.
Yeah, I think that's really a good thing to know. I do think, though, that a lot of people aren't really sure how to do that. So what would you say is a good, respectful way to ask somebody what their pronouns are?
Yeah. It's really normal to feel unsure of how to act or what to say in these situations, but by stating your own pronouns at the beginning of a conversation, just like you did, Melissa, at the beginning of this video, that helps open up and provide a safe opportunity for someone else to share their pronouns without feeling called out. Just as a side note, though, there are some times, especially in a professional setting, that someone may opt out of using their pronouns, like I did at the beginning of this video. So you never want to force someone to share them. You just kind of want to open the floor to make them feel comfortable too. In a professional setting where pronouns are going to be something that's unavoidable, that's where you tend to go more toward the question of which pronouns would you like me to use, which allows them to choose in which situations, which pronouns they would like to use.
That's awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah, of course. I will say sharing pronouns always feels awkward at first for absolutely anyone, but the more we practice and the more normal it becomes, the more we become more comfortable with it in our everyday language.
Yeah, great tip.
So another place that we see gender norms kind of creeping into business practices is in job titles, actually. So it's really important for you to kind of take a step back and look at your company and look at your titles and understand how they might not align with someone's identity. For example, we see a lot a salesperson or a chairman commonly used in our language today, when by making a simple switch to calling someone a salesperson or a chair of a committee or whatever it might be, that ensures that whoever fills that role can feel represented by their title. And the last place that we can really look to, or that we see gender exclusive language being used, is when we're addressing groups of people. So we hear phrases a lot like ladies and gentlemen, guys, ladies, and those can really easily be switched to things like folks, people, you all, or y'all if you're in the South, team, things like that, that make everyone feel included no matter what their identity might be.
Yeah, and that's another one. I think it's just so ingrained in us to just use these terms we've used for so long. So being really intentional about your language is important, and kind of correcting yourself and just catching yourself as you're speaking is important.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so moving on to race, demographics, and stereotypes.
Yes. So the first thing you have to understand before we dig into anything on this slide is that there's a lot of ugliness in our history, and some of our phrases and our linguistic structures that are embedded in our everyday language have racist and exclusionary roots. So it's important to work to make yourself aware of these and to erase them from the vocabulary used throughout your organization. Some of these structures include the way that we use race as a descriptor. So this is something for the most part that should be avoided, but it's something that might look like saying he's a tall Hispanic man. In that instance, their race isn't integral to the story that you're saying, so you can just say he's a tall man and the same point gets across. Now, there are times when race is important. For example, saying something like Ketanji Brown Jackson is the first Black woman Supreme Court justice. In that case, her race really adds something to the story and really gets the point across that you're trying to make. So it's not a hard and fast rule, just something that you should really step back and consider. What are you adding to it, to what you're saying by including someone's race in the statement? Yeah. And then some of our everyday phrases that we use actually have racist origins or are exclusionary of gender identities or socioeconomic circumstances. Some of these include phrases like saying someone's at risk or bossy or using the word master in any way. We also see heteronormative language automatically used a lot throughout our interactions with coworkers and with the media. And this can look like when you're talking to a man, asking him about his wife at home, or when you're talking to a woman, asking about their husband at home. You can really easily create a more inclusive environment by using the word partner or spouse. And you also, when switching out that language, can make it so you don't force someone to out themselves in a situation that they might not want to be talking about the gender of their partner.
Yeah, makes sense.
There are also some phrases that we use today that originate from racist and exclusionary history that we might not even know about. So a great example of this one is the phrase hip hip hooray. This actually started as an anti-Semitic German rally cry, and obviously has a completely different meaning in the way that we use it today, but it's still important to be aware of where these phrases come from and then to work to remove them when you find out that their origin might be racist or exclusionary.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then in terms of this one about using outdated terms, I think that a lot of people want to make sure they're doing the right thing here, but may get a little nervous and tripped up making sure they're using the correct terms because they do change. So do you have any tips for making sure that we're always using the most up-to-date language when we're speaking externally?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a way to always make sure that you're going to use the right phrases or the right language, because no one's ever going to get it right all of the time. And the most important thing in those situations is really how you handle it when you mess up or when someone asks you to eliminate a phrase from the language that you're using. It's important to apologize, thank them for educating you, and just be humble enough to correct yourself and move forward with it. That's going to be the best way that you can learn, because there's not one resource. Everything's changing every day. So just listen to your peers and really take in what it is they're saying and be humble about it.
Okay, so moving on to disabilities and mental health.
Yeah, so this is one demographic that tends to sometimes get forgotten about when we're talking about inclusion. But it's really important to think about the people that do live with a disability. This community has a lot of varied experiences and ideologies, and sometimes disabilities aren't even visible, so you might not know that someone has one. So it's really important to look at this group and ensure that the language that you're using is inclusive of their community. So to start, the biggest thing is make sure you're referring to the person before the disability. Not doing so can be dehumanizing to them. So use terms such as a person with a disability, not a disabled person. And also refrain from using the word normal when speaking about people who don't live with disability. We also want to avoid using descriptors such as bipolar, OCD, ADD in non-clinical ways, such as saying something like the weather is being really bipolar today. And you also want to refrain from using derogatory terms for mental illness, such as spaz or psycho. And it's important to note here also, when discussing suicide with a reporter, if you're working in the healthcare space, Columbia's safe reporting guidelines really strongly suggest using the phrase "they died by suicide" versus "they killed themselves," and then not publicly sharing any further information on this.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And then the last thing we want to talk about for people with mental or physical conditions is to avoid language that suggests they're victims of something. So saying someone suffers from or is confined to is really like boiling down their experience to one thing about them instead of seeing them as a whole person.
Yeah, so this is another one I think maybe people don't actually think of so much, especially in the healthcare space. It's something that we really want to be cognizant of when we're talking about data or solutions that we're offering to the market. So I would love to maybe role play this one a little bit. So let's say I'm a reporter with Healthcare IT News. And I'm talking to you, you're the CEO of a diagnostics company, and talking to you about some data that you just released on HIV monitoring. So I'm the reporter. So Deej, what does this data ultimately mean for patients?
So with this technology, people living with HIV gain more time back in their lives, enabling them to focus on things that bring them joy and lead to a long and healthy life.
Love that. So just to kind of drill in there, you focused on living with HIV versus suffering from or saying an HIV patient. And so it's just that small little language tweak, but it really focuses on, really the people aspect versus, talking about them from, suffering or just pushing, focusing on them as HIV patients. So that really does make a big difference, that small language tweak.
It really does. Always put the person first and you're almost guaranteed to get it right.
Great. All right, let's see. I think this is our last one here. So cultural awareness. Definitely want to talk about some cultural terms here. And here, we're really talking about terms that are rooted in specific cultures. And so they're not necessarily offensive, right? But they just may not translate well to different cultures or to global audiences. So as the world becomes more global, companies are becoming more global too. And so that means that our language needs to also become more global. And we want to make sure that when we're speaking to different audiences, whether it's reporters, customers, or other stakeholders internationally, that they really understand the references that we're making and that we're not isolating them. So let's get into the different buckets here. We'll first talk about cultural idioms. Can you share a little bit about that one?
Yeah, so it's exactly what you just said. There are certain terms or phrases that we use that are more cultural and they don't always translate to diverse audiences. Examples of this is saying something like hold down the fort or call a spade a spade. You want to make sure that, especially as a spokesperson for your organization, what you're saying makes sense to the entirety of your audience. Your goal in these media interactions should be to use clear and concise language. So instead of picking an idiom or a phrase like this, it's better to kind of take a step back, consider what it is you're trying to actually say with that phrase, and then figure out if there's a better way for you to articulate it that's on brand for your company, and that gets across the point that you're trying to make in a really clear way.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I'll add here too is there are definitely ways to create impactful statements that are relevant to the industry, and that will stick in people's mind, even if we're not using some of these, older, more cultural phrases, and we call them zingers, and we help our clients create them all the time. And they actually have a more impactful and memorable impact on your stakeholders than using some of these more cultural phrases.
Yep. And it goes back to, Melissa, what you were saying at the beginning of this whole training, which is a lot of your goal in media is to look for the sound bites. And if you can have a sound bite that's really clear, that talks to the industry challenges that your company is facing or your audience is facing, that's going to go a lot further with your audience than using an idiom that some people might not understand.
Right.
And then the final thing about cultural awareness is, you and I have said this for this whole training, but no group is a monolith. Every demographic is made up of individuals and therefore made up of different viewpoints, of different beliefs, and of different principles. So by grouping people together and saying something like Muslim people think can really come across as you lumping an entire demographic together and assuming that they all think and act the same, instead of allowing everyone to be an individual and to understand the duality of what goes into making up a variety of demographics, really. So just working on seeing a person for a person and looking outside of the demographic or a single demographic that they might fall in.
Great. All right, well, thank you so much, Deej. That was really helpful information for our spokespeople and everyone as they speak externally and head into any media interactions. So that wraps up this quick primer. We hope that you are feeling more empowered and confident heading into any press engagements that you may have. And here are a couple of additional resources that can help you along the way. The first is an inclusive writing guide. It's a free download on our website that goes deeper into some of the concepts that we talked about here in this video, and it helps with writing more inclusively. So whether it's a blog or a press release or any other kind of content, it will help share ways that you can make sure that you are writing in a more inclusive way. And the second is an article on how to integrate DEI into external communications and why and how marketing can align with your company's DEI initiatives. So thank you so much for joining us today. And if you are interested in a more immersive media training, please get in touch with us. You can see our contact information on the slide below. And until then, good luck in any media interactions that you may have. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.